All right, I think I'm live. Okay. What's up, everybody? I don't know. I don't go live very often. Usually I pre-record these and put them out. Honestly, going live like this gives me a little bit of like weird anxiety, right? But anyway, I just wanted to discuss the results from the fights last night. I got about 45 minutes until the Eagles kick off and most likely get their asses handed to them by the Buccaneers. But number one rushing team in the NFL against the number 26 rushing team. So maybe they have a chance. I know the Buccaneers are a little banged up. So I'm keeping hope alive. But anyway, I wanted to just kind of take this time and talk about the fights last night because it was a good card. A lot of decisions on the card, but there were some good fights. The main event was really showcase for this, right? Like it lived up to everything. And it was kind of reminiscent of honestly how the UFC opened up last year when Max Holloway went up against Calvin Kattar on ESP or ABC, right? They had a card on ABC. And honestly, the result kind of played out the same. But we're going to walk through the card from the bottom to the top and just talk about the results of each of the fights. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. It's 10 a.m. and I'm already drinking beer. So I don't know. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? But anyway, so first fight of the night, TJ Brown versus Charles Rosa. Rosa takes his fight on short notice. And TJ Brown, man, was just able to control the fight with his wrestling. And that's been a problem for Rosa a little bit. Like I know he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I know that he's pretty good on the ground and everything, but he just spends too much time on the bottom. And TJ Brown was able to control a lot of the wrestling transitions. That's why it's so important to be able to wrestle if you're doing mixed martial arts, right? Brian Kelleher, kind of the same thing against Kevin Groom. Court McGee picked up a pretty dominant win over Ramiz Brahimaj. Ramiz Brahimaj, I think is how you pronounce it. And Jamie Pickett picked up a win against Joseph Holmes. Now, the Pickett versus Holmes fight, Holmes was a guy who competed on the Dana White Contender Series, and Dana was like, you got to go get some more experience somewhere else before we let you into the UFC. And when you saw this fight against Jamie Pickett, you kind of saw why. Joseph Holmes is a guy who I think is going to be very talented, but he's just not UFC ready yet, right? Has a little bit more work to do. Jamie Pickett's a tough first opponent, but I just think that he, in general, has like I said, I think he has some work to do in a lot of different areas. I think he's a little bit too green. But moving on to the main card, this was the one that we broke down. And if you guys tuned into the breakdowns that I did for this, I actually think I did a pretty decent job of picking most of these. I think I went 5 for 6. And yeah, but Bill, and I was mispronouncing names the whole time I did it, so apologies for that. But first fight on the main card was Bill Algeo versus Joanderson Brito. And honestly, I thought that Bill Algeo was going to have a little bit more success on the feet, but he really was able to control the grappling transitions a little bit, right? Like a lot of judges felt like he won all 3 rounds. Close fight. Joanderson Brito was putting it on him, though, man, throwing big hooks, landing some big shots against him, pressuring him back against the cage. His gas tank held up a little bit better than I thought it would. And honestly, Joanderson Brito, man, is a guy who, after watching that fight, has a lot of potential. I mean, he did burn himself out a little bit, those and big misses and stuff like that, right? And getting into those grappling exchanges where you use a lot of stocky movements. Got a fucking hair floating around, especially like when you're a very stocky guy, right? Like short and muscularly built. It's tiring on you. So I think he needs to learn how to manage the pace a little bit. But also, Bill Algeo, man, is just a tough opponent, right? Just a tough guy to get for your first UFC fight. He's a guy who debuted, like we said, against Ricardo Lamas, fought Spike Carlisle after that, and then lost his most recent bout. Who did he just lose against? But anyway, Bill Algeo picks up a nice win. And yeah, good fight. Joanderson Brito, young guy. I think he's 26 years old, has a lot of promise. And Algeo was just able to out-grapple him a little bit. And again, that veteran prowess kind of came through, right? It was kind of shocking to me. The odds on this card didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like the even though Slava Borshev won, that's the fight we're going to talk about next. He was like a minus 210 underdog, and Dakota Bush looked good early, right? Caitlin Chikadze, those odds made sense to me. Royval, Bonterine, kinda. Collier, Sherman made sense. And Kattar versus Chikadze was egregious, in my opinion. But what the fuck can you do? Anyway, next fight, Slava Borshev versus Dakota Bush. Dakota Bush comes out, and he's looking great early on, man. He's getting his hands working. He gets a takedown. He's able to take Borshev to the ground. And then you start wondering, like, okay, you know Dakota Bush is pretty good on the ground, right? I think he has 3 or 4 rear naked choke wins to his name throughout his professional career. And you just start wondering, like, hey, is this going to be where, we find out that Slava Borshev has a big hole in his game. And I think Slava Borshev answered a lot of questions. He was able to fight through that early takedown, get off his back, get back to his feet, and he had Dakota Bush pinned up against the cage. And again, when he starts letting his hands go, man, he's very smooth and he has a lot of kickboxing experience. He's training with alpha male, so you should know that his ground game should be on point, right? Like he should be able to get up from those situations. And he caught when they were up against the cage, he threw a right, and then he came a right to the body, and then he came around the left of the body. And while he was throwing that left of the body, he caught Dakota Bush extending with the right hand, and it opened up the liver shot that he landed. And I think that extension, like he timed it perfectly. Like Dakota Bush was fully extended, not able to protect the liver at all, and boom, landed, crumbled him, the fight's over. Slava Borshev, incredible UFC debut. And a guy who you got to watch out for, man. Like I said, a lot of experience kickboxing and bad motherfucker, dude. So Slava Borshev, definitely someone to watch. Next fight, Katlyn Chookagian versus Jennifer Maia. This was one of those ones where I thought that Katlyn Chookagian honestly looked as good as she's ever looked in her career. She was managing the distance well, defended all of the takedown attempts from Jennifer Maia. And again, guys, I said this before when we went into the fight. The problem with Jennifer Maia is that even when she pushes her opponents up against the cage, she doesn't move her feet to create angles to get the takedowns. And that's a lot of the times why you see people who are jiu-jitsu specialists, they have a really hard time getting the fight to the ground. Even though when they do get on top, they do well, right? But getting it there is a completely different story. And for whatever reason, when Maia gets up against the cage, she's always just she's pummeling and she's using her head well, but she's never creating angles with her feet. She doesn't have to work up against the cage. So in those moments, Katlyn Chookagian was able to frame off and get back to where she wanted to be, right? And also, she tried like a drop Seoinage. Jennifer Maia did, I think, in the second round that allowed Katlyn Chookagian to take her back. And that type of judo throw, man, your timing has to be impeccable, and it helps a lot. You see a lot of like drop Seoinages hit in the gi. Drop Seoinages when they drop to their knees and boom, right? Like toss a person over the shoulder. She tried that, and Katlyn Chookagian almost got her back. Ended up on her back. I don't know if I don't think she sunk the hooks in, but that's a technique. It's a judo technique that it really works a lot better if you're able to get like a collar and the sleeve, right? And then you can, boom, it gives you, but without those attachments, it makes it hard to hit and you have to have really good timing on it. And again, Katlyn Chookagian is long and lanky and like has those long legs. Like, man, hard to take those people down as it is. But that drop Seoinage was a big mistake. I think it happened in the second round because I remember thinking Maia was having a better second round. But Katlyn Chookagian was also able to land takedowns of her own, stay on top of Maia, and she just looked great throughout the fight, man. I thought she looked incredible. She had good movement, picking her opponent apart, and just stayed calm and composed and showed why she was like a minus 200 favorite going into this fight. Katlyn Chookagian looked great. I'm a big fan of Chookagian, man. I think she has good footwork. She's constantly throwing out volume. She has a really good understanding of range and everything, and she's just constantly keeping something in your face. And not to mention, people forget, she has like a brown belt, I believe, under Ricardo Almeida, right? So training with Mark Henry and all those guys. I mean, Katlyn Chookagian is very good. The problem is just the same with every girl at 125, right? Valentina Shevchenko is the queen. And it's like dethroning her. Man, that's going to be tough. But Katlyn Chookagian looked great. I thought it was one of her best performances yet. And yeah, hopefully this microphone sounds okay. And this is but anyway, let's move on to the next fight between Brandon Royval and Rogerio Bonterine. Royval, I think he won all of the exchanges almost on the feet. There were a couple moments of success where Bonterine had, but the second round was probably Bonterine's strongest round. I thought Brandon Royval won the first and the third, and Bonterine without a doubt won the second. I thought that he took Brandon Royval down, controlled him well. And again, guys, we talked about this one going into the fight too. Brandon Royval, despite the fact that he won this fight, and Bonterine is a tough fight, man, not taking anything away from him. But Brandon Royval has a serious problem, same with Bill Algeo, where they exposed their back to their opponent. I mean, early on in the Joe Anderson-Brito fight, when they were going at it, Joe Anderson-Brito came out, landed a beautiful takedown, and got to the back of Bill Algeo immediately. And Brandon Royval gave his back up to Rogerio Bonterine, right? Guys who favor spinning techniques, or for whatever reason, they just have a tendency. I don't even know if it stemmed off spinning techniques, but they just have a tendency to give their back up. And I think that's something that Royval and Bill Algeo need to really fix. Like, they need to focus on that, because Sure, right now you're getting away with it and your escapes are good. And Royval, especially, is really good at always forcing scrambles and keeping his hips moving. But you saw that, like, for Brandon Royval in the Pantoja fight, that came back to bite him eventually once Pantoja was able to sink both of his hooks in, right? It's just not a good place to be, even if you feel good defending yourself from there. So Royval looked great on the feet, but he doesn't. He also, another problem that I have with Royval, and like, he doesn't sprawl, right? Like, whenever guys shoot takedowns on him, it's very easy to take him to the ground, and I almost think it's because he's so comfortable playing from the bottom and guard because he's always looking for Goga Platas and shit like that, right? Like, he's always looking to tie you up and somehow. And he's got that. He's got great cardio, great flexibility. So, like, I think that those positions don't really bother him. But you guys saw in the third round when he was able to get on top of Bonterine that he was able to dominate from there. So it's like, in fighting, it's just super important to be on top. And when Royval, if he gets to a point where he's going to start challenging for a world title against guys, I mean, like, Royval already has a loss to Brandon Moreno for this, like, same reason, right? Like, he gave up his back and it eventually led to him. I mean, he got a shoulder injury, like a shoulder popped out of socket, but he gave his back up to Moreno too, right? So it's like, this problem, it needs to be fixed if you're going to compete for a world title. I understand that you feel comfortable there, but it's a hard position to get out of. And if you get somebody who really understands what's going on, like a Davison Figueiredo, I think that Figueiredo has a good idea of what's going, like the way he choked out and had fucking like Joseph Benavidez extended. Like, if you're gonna fight guys like that, you can't be giving your back. It's just too fucking risky. So Royval needs to work on his takedown defense. And I think that he's a real problem in the division. I think his striking is very clean. Like I said, his cardio is great. He's long, he's lanky, he's confident, but the takedown defense needs work. And you definitely do not want to be giving your back up. Um, all right, moving on to the heavyweight bout between Jake Collier and Chase Sherman. This was one where, honestly, I thought we would see a little bit more of Chase Sherman getting dotted up on the feet, right? My biggest complaint with Chase Sherman every time I watch one of his fights is that he doesn't move his head. He moves it. He's gotten a little bit better with his movement and stuff, especially when he's being defensive. But it's like, when you're focusing on defense, it's a little bit easier to focus on movement because you're focused strictly on avoiding the shots of somebody, right? My big complaint with Chase Sherman is that he doesn't move his head when he throws offense. Like, he watches his handiwork too much. Like, his head stays right here, looking straight at you while he's throwing punches. And it allows guys to tee off on him, and then that consequently tires him out, right? So that was my big complaint about Chase Sherman going into this fight. However, people forget, man. Okay, first off, Jake Collier is such an interesting case. I think he's put on a lot of weight recently because of like mental health issues and stuff like that. Like, he came into the UFC weighing 185 pounds. He fought at middleweight. I personally, on his way up to heavyweight, I think the best he looked was at light heavyweight. He had some power there. He had some speed, but since then he's gained even more weight. He came in like a half pound under the heavyweight limit of 265 pounds, and yeah, but people also forget about him. Not only was he a middleweight, right? So he has that like speed and stuff, and but also he started out in jiu-jitsu when he was like 20 years old. So he has a pretty good jiu-jitsu background. And when he caught that kick of Sherman and took it to the ground, he was able to slice into mount, eventually force Chase Sherman to give up his back, and he choked him out and he looked good. So Jake Collier to me is an interesting case. A lot of people also felt like he won his fight against Carlos Felipe and that he should be on a 3-fight winning streak right now. Pretty impressive considering, like I said, it's tough because when you look at the heavyweight division and the two guys who are about to battle it out next weekend, Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane, that to me is what your body should fucking look like if you're going to compete for a heavyweight world title. Like, those guys they can't get down to 205, right? Like, Jake Collier, I think, like, obviously, if you look at him, like, he's got a gut, man. And I know he's put on weight because of mental health issues, whatever it is, whatever the weight. I don't know exactly. I don't know the motherfucker, right? But my point is that if he would trim down, I really think he would do significantly better in lighter weight divisions, right? Because I think at 205, he would maintain some of his strength, gets a little bit more speed back, and a little bit more cardio. But like I said, a lot of people felt like he won the Carlos Felipe fight. A lot of people feel like this guy should be on a 3-fight winning streak right now. And yeah, he's looking good, man. I mean, if you're going to fight a heavy, no knocking him. You got to do whatever you're going to do. If that's where you feel comfortable, maybe he likes to eat. I don't fucking know. But I'm just saying, I think that he would be more competitive because he can box. He throws some unorthodox striking in there. Like you see that like guys get thrown off a little bit by his striking and shit sometimes. He's very good. I think Jake Collier, he's got a lot of experience. He's been doing MMA for a long time. I think Jake Collier is very good, but I think he would be better if he lost weight. I just think that when you look at the guys at the top of that division, there's guys like Derek Lewis are a little bit of an exception, right? But like Cyril Gane, Francis Ngannou, Stipe Miocic, those guys are all like built like they belong. You know what I mean? Jake Collier is a guy who could definitely get down to a lighter weight class. He's shown it to us before. So we'll see what's in the cards for him moving forward. All right. The main event, Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze. I could not fucking understand who is setting the odds on this one. Like you never want to be, I didn't want to be overconfident going into it, but like my money went on Kattar all day. He was like a plus 190 underdog. He had fought Max Holloway, guys like Shane Burgos, Zabit Magomed Sharipov. He had fought all these high level guys, right? Jeremy Stevens. And for whatever fucking reason, the odds makers gave a guy who hasn't had a UFC main event yet, that he was like a minus 210 underdog or some shit. I was like, who the fuck is setting these? Right? Made no sense to me. But this main event played out very similarly to how the main event that started off 2021 started out when Max Holloway on ABC beat the fuck out of Calvin Kattar, right? Calvin Kattar did the same, and Bisping mentioned this several times during the broadcast. Calvin Kattar essentially did to Giga Chikadze what Max Holloway did to Calvin Kattar last year. It was just odd how they, but first card of the year for both of them, right? And they had the same sort of performance. Great fucking fight. And one thing I want to point out, Giga Chikadze is a tough motherfucker. He ate so many elbows, man. Some of them were making me cringe. I was like, oh, maybe the ref should just stop it. He's like too tough for his own good, man. Like that spinning elbow that, I mean, he was landing them all shot and he was timing it off the left hand, right? He was landing it all fight and timing it off the left hand. But the one that he landed in the 5th round, man, that one made me cringe. It was a beautiful performance by Calvin Kattar. And also something I wanted to bring up, like we were talking about this in our competition class in jiu-jitsu, right? Like when you're going through it, you get exhausted, like when you're in the middle of like all these rounds and stuff, right? But eventually you kind of hit a wall and you become almost like comfortably numb was the word that my coach used to describe it. And he's right. You kind of just like push through it and you start going again. Kattar lands this takedown in the 1st round, right? And then he wins the 2nd round. And when the 3rd round opens up, they both look exhausted. Like both of their movements start looking labored to me. But then when they came back out in the 4th round, it looked like Kattar had caught a little bit of a second wind. And I kind of think that's what that second wind is. It's more you hit that wall. It feels like you can't go any further. And then you just become numb to it. And again, you got to think that the advantage lied in Calvin Kattar's court because of the fact that he's had main events before against guys like Dan Ige and Max Holloway, right? Like that matters. It matters the level of competition that you faced. It matters that, you know, you've been in main events. And Giga, I just thought that the level of UFC competition that he's faced so far, it didn't match up to Kattar's. And also, man, the jab of Kattar, the fact that Kattar uses his hands as opposed to kicks as his primary weapon. Giga Chikadze, I will say, did impress me with his hand speed and everything. Like there were moments where he was landing and I was like, oh, fuck, he might end up knocking Kattar out. Like he looks fast, but then Kattar just took over as the fight went on. But I mean, I said this going into the fight too. Name a UFC champion that has a kick first approach, right? You realize how exhausting that's going to be for you. And Giga Chikadze, while he's a very good striker all around, strong kickboxing experience, he relies heavily on his kicks to set other things up. Whereas I think other guys tend to hide stuff behind their punches and then sprinkle the kicks in. And I think if you're going to hold a world title in the UFC, that's the approach you have to have. Giga has to get a little bit more comfortable with his hands and use those to set the kicks up because A, kicks are exhausting, but B, it's very hard to throw combinations with kicks. Like it's a one and done thing. And Anthony Smith made a good point after the fight too. It's very hard to throw kicks while you're moving backwards. You can throw punches from almost anywhere though. Like you saw Shane Burgos get knocked out by Calvin Kattar with that he caught him with the overhand right. And as Burgos was kind of falling into him, Kattar was able to step back and throw the uppercut, right? So I just favor boxers, right? I favor people who can string combos together, get more volume out, and keep pressure on their opponent without using big bursts of energy, which is what kicking essentially is. I didn't understand the odds in this one. I I mean, Calvin Kattar's a bad motherfucker. He's at the top of the division. And I think the guy that I hate playing matchmaker, right? Because it's a hard thing to do. Like whoever has that job, shit, good luck to you. But uh when we start getting into these fights where you got guys at the top of the division, I like to kind of think about who they should fight next. And I kind of think that Calvin Kattar should fight Brian Ortega next. I think it's a great matchup. And you know what I loved about this fight too? Like Kattar landed that takedown in the first round, got to the back of Giga Chikadze. And at the end of the fight, when they're doing the interview, his name pops up and it says Brazilian Jiu Jitsu blue belt, as if that's the thing that won him the fight. No, man, it was the elbows, the jab, the constant pressure, the constant volume. I just thought it was funny that they threw on there that he was a blue belt. But I will say, Kattar's ground game looked much improved. Even when Giga was able to reverse position, he locked up that kind of arm triangle from the bottom. And while it was hard, it's a very hard submission to get. It eventually led to Giga exposing his back. And you know, that takedown was a big deal because I think it takes a lot of energy to try to get back to your feet when you're on the ground, right? Or to get on top. So that first round and Kattar's wrestling coming into play was a big deal. And but yeah, man, it was a dominant showing. And then for a guy like Giga Chikadze, you got to remember, guys, this is a tough fight for him. For me, this was a giant leap up in competition for Giga. Like going from beating like Cub Swanson and Edson Barboza to fighting Calvin Kattar. Barboza's very good. Don't get me wrong. Barboza could knock anybody out on any given day. Very impressive win. But you saw Barboza was able in the second round of their fight. He was able to pressure Giga Chikadze up against the cage a little bit, right? And you were able to see Kattar was able to replicate that a little bit. Kattar's got a little bit longer arms and he's better with his hands. It was just, I thought it was a little bit too much too soon for Giga Chikadze. Like he hit the hype, he got on this hype train and everybody started being like, oh, this is it. This is the next guy. Man, I don't know. I think a good next fight for Giga Chikadze would be a guy like Dan Ige, right? A guy who is very good, who you probably have an advantage on the feet against, but he would present you with wrestling trouble. He has a recent loss to Calvin Kattar. There are guys like Josh Emmett in the division. There are options for Giga Chikadze. And same as Calvin Kattar, I think Giga Chikadze walks away from this fight a better mixed martial artist. Tough as fuck. I can't believe the beating he took. It was, like I said, it was incredible how reminiscent it was of the ABC card that opened up 2021, where Holloway did the same thing to Kattar. Kattar like got his revenge, right? Got his payback. And yeah, it was, I mean, an incredible performance, a fun fight. Like I said, and a good one, like after like we had what? Algio and Brito ended in a decision. Slava knocked out Dakota Bush with that body shot, TKO. Chukagian decision. Roy Val decision, and then Jake Collier tapped out Chase Sherman. And there, like up and down the card, there were just a lot of decisions, right? Jamie Pickett decision, Court McGee decision, Brian Kelleher decision, TJ Brown decision. But this main event made up for all that. I thought it was a great way to open up 2022, and definitely excited for the things to come for both of these guys. Calvin Kattar still. His ground game has a little bit of work to do. Like I said, it looked good in this. His wrestling looked good, but you could tell that there were just some things that if he had a little more experience on the ground, maybe he could have. I was thinking when he got him on the ground in the first round, I was like, is Calvin Kattar about to fucking tap Giga Chikadze out? But you could just see that he didn't have a firm enough understanding of like the position to pick up like a rear naked choke or something from there, right? Like he locked up a body triangle, but there were just things that you could just tell he wasn't quite comfortable there, right? Definitely a guy who likes being on his feet. So, I don't know, man. It was it was a fun card to watch. Like I thought most of the fights were fun. Even Caitlin Chikagian, like I said, I thought she looked great. Slava Borchev, Dakota Bush was fun. Algio versus Brito was like, they were fun fights, just a lot of decisions. And the main event went the same way, but Chikadze just took a beating. But anyway, guys, we've got about 23 minutes until the Eagles start, and I got to cook some food for myself and shit. But I just wanted to oh yeah, Islam versus Beneil. Yeah, that'll definitely be coming out, man. I think that's one of the most exciting fights to look forward to in the lightweight division. There's obviously we got UFC 270 coming up this weekend. Great card there. Flyweight titles on the line, heavyweight titles on the line. Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to if you're a UFC fan, man. And this main event kind of gave you hopefully a preview of what the upcoming year is going to be like. So, yeah. I'm gonna sign off, guys. Like I said, I'm gonna go down and get myself mentally ready for this game. Hopefully, the Eagles don't get the fucking shit beat out of them today by the Buccaneers. Fuck Tom Brady, right? And thank you guys for tuning in. Gone. That's the thing about Gone too. UK won. A, I appreciate you always watching and commenting on shit. B, thank you for pointing out the timestamp thing yesterday. And C, Cyril Gahn is a very technical striker, but he's also really fucking good on the ground. And if you're watching just like kind of early preview stuff, the way that Stipe wrestled, I know that his takedown defense improved. And right, Francis Ngannou's right. But if you look at the way that Stipe was able to take Francis down in their first fight, and the way that like Francis wasn't able to get back up, like missing some white belt fundamentals in his jiu-jitsu, Cyril Gahn is a legitimate submission threat. Like he's not just technical on the feet, he's technical on the ground. You don't usually see a martial artist that well-rounded that moves that well, that's that precise, that does all this fucking different shit so well for being so heavy, right? So that's a great fight. I'm really looking forward to watching film on all these guys breaking that one down. But yeah, guys, that's going to wrap this one up for me. Like I said, I'm going to go get myself emotionally prepared for this Eagles game. And thank you guys for tuning in as always. We'll get a breakdown out this week. I'm going to try to do these live things more often. I don't know. I got to get my fucking internet connection figured out. But anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm going to wrap this up. Have a great day. And bye-bye.